Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, author of Visualizing Happiness in Every Area of Your Life and host of this podcast, Incredible Life Creator. And today I have with me Dr. Angelica Alberto. Hey, Angelica.
Hi, how are you, Dr. Kimberly?
I am good. We were just talking about we had a great day. I'm excited to have you on. And just so people know who you are, I'm going to read your bio. So, Dr. Angelica Alberto is an integrative physical therapist transforming the modern healthcare experience by bridging the gap between conventional practices and holistic integrative approaches. As a doctor of physical therapy, integrative health coach, and advocate for preventative health and longevity, she combines traditional physical therapy practices with lifestyle medicine, nervous system regulation, and mindful movement strategies to deliver a personalized mind, body, soul approach that empowers all her patients to reclaim their vitality. She currently runs a private practice based in Los Angeles, treating patients experiencing chronic pain, tension headaches, migraines, fatigue, and lifestyle related challenges. Inspired by her own journey overcoming debilitating migraines, Dr. Angelica's mission is to guide anyone to reconnect back with their bodies, optimize their health, and step into their fullest potential. So, we've had some conversations in the past, and I know your approach is very different than a lot of PTs that I know. So, just so people can get to know you, tell us your story. Where did you start and how did you get into all of this?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that introduction and for giving me the space to share about my story and how I got here. So, with all of that said, people might be wondering just, okay, if it's what is exactly integrative physical therapy? And what led up to me treating in the way that I do today started out as briefly mentioned in my bio, was my own personal health journey. When I was still in undergrad, I was only 19 years old. I was actually on track towards becoming a PT because I wanted to learn other alternative ways and how to actually help my family not be limited by the number of metabolic conditions that so many of my family members were being diagnosed with. And I found exercise was a beautiful modality for that.
Mhm.
But along that journey, the paradox of it all was I got sick. And when I was going from specialist to specialist, trying to figure out why my blood pressure was skyrocketing. For instance, it would be 151 over 101, which was completely abnormal for a 19-year-old who was on paper healthy and moving, eating the right things. And I was experiencing these odd, debilitating migraines almost 2 to 3 times a week. And no specialist or my primary care physician could figure out what it was except say, oh, it's part of your family medical history. It's part of your genetics. And that really felt like a wall that shouldn't have been there. So I still kept going to the doctors and eventually they sent me to a migraine specialist and I was like, great, they're gonna get to the resolve of all of this. And it just ended up turning into a conversation of how they were gonna start putting me on high blood pressure medications, propanolols, beta blockers, whatever. And I was like, okay, why don't I pick up the medications and I'm going to actually get to the bottom of this. I don't know how, but we're going to figure out what the root of this is. So that led me down this whole rabbit hole of let me still finish this degree of pursuing my doctorate in physical therapy because I absolutely became so fascinated by the intricacies of the human body, how it functioned, what it took so that it could function optimally. But then I also realized that was only one piece of the puzzle as we're now learning. What I realized in that journey was how much my nervous system played a role in my blood pressure, in whether I had a migraine that would get set off. Did I have healthy coping mechanisms for my emotional reactivity? When I was going through a bout of traffic, my stress levels were at a 10 out of 10 when, everyone experiences stress, but to go through your life always experiencing every single inconvenience or thing that doesn't go our way or just a natural part of life as a 10 out of 10, no wonder my neck was always up to here in stress. So that is when 3 years later, fast forward, I was in PT school, and that was the first time I had personally experienced a my own form of depression. And I finally sought care from the school mental therapist. And that was my first insight into giving the language to what I was experiencing up here relative to here. So I explored that entire realm. I worked with a therapist for at least a good year and a half, and then eventually I still was experiencing a little bit of a block. And then in my own studies of learning how the body also stores so much of our emotion, not just cognitively, right? So that's how I ended up studying somatics in conjunction with learning about the paradigm of what we do as a physical therapist. So that eventually led to me mixing these different modalities. And I eventually, fast forward without getting into the nitty-gritty, took the leap of faith to start my own practice where I'm able to hold that kind of space for my patients, where I acknowledge that you have upper trap tension, you have lower back tension. Let's look at all of the other lifestyle components and what is going on in your environment that might potentially be influencing why you keep getting those flare-ups. What is actually putting you at a high risk for heart attacks, for all of these different chronic conditions that we take for granted and just kind of pass it off as, let's put you on a laundry list of medications. So that's essentially the foundation of all of the work that I do today.
Mm. So when you're working with a client, so you're not just having them move their body in certain positions, you're also telling them to look inside and see like how they're feeling and how their body's feeling. Kind of describe if you were if I was your new patient and I came in and I was having, well, I can tell you something real. So I have some issues with my hips. So
Okay.
I come in and if I sit too long and then I try and stand up, the hip bone gets kind of stuck and then it finally pops into place and then I can go walking.
Mhm.
So, and that causes me pain. And it's like you said, there's really good days and there's really bad days. So if I came in, where would you start me?
Right. So what I love about the approach that I've really refined throughout the past few years is I will have the orthopedic lens. Let's ensure that we're taking into account all of the potential factors of what's pissing off the tissue, are there some muscle imbalances at play that naturally are getting influenced by our common postures throughout the day? Are there certain movement impairments that we also need to take into account? For instance, sitting for a while puts a lot of pressure on our piriformis, all of those fun muscles that are under there. So I will approach it from that lens first. Then I'll go in to assess more broadly what I call the four pillars of what constitutes to your overall health and well-being. So physical is our primary. Then we look into how are you nourishing your body? Did you get enough water today? Are your meals balanced? Did you have a busy day the past few days so you didn't get enough of the macronutrients that your body needed? And then we dive into how was your sleep quality the past few days? Because that also, as we know, really influences our ability to heal or calm down those inflammatory processes that naturally happen. And the last thing is our stress management, because as we also are seeing more and more, so many of these different chronic aches, pains naturally get exacerbated by these excess levels of cortisol running through our bloodstream, whether it's from personal, what's going on in the collective, and whatnot. So that gives me a framework of, cool, let's dive into here or let's dive into here. That's where the creativity comes in my sessions of, okay, If you actually came in and you just had the craziest day yesterday and you feel yourself bottling up into this, I'm not going to guide you through some glute bridges because that's probably the last thing that you need today. I'm going to guide you through a set of nervous system regulation techniques, so then the work actually becomes a little bit more potent.
Mhm. That makes total sense because if you're all stiff and your body's like, I don't want to move right now.
It's like, okay, sweetie, that t totally makes sense, but not right now. Like,
Yes, yes. So talk about that regulation. How do you help people go into that to actually do that? And I guess it's kind of like a two-part question. And what do you tell them to do at home so they can self-regulate themselves?
that's a really great question. So, because it's a little nuanced, where people come to me for physical therapy, so they're like, okay, why are you telling me to breathe right now? So, what I have to explain, there's a huge educational component to really connect the why. That's such a proponent of the work that I do is the efficacy of what I am doing can only work as well as it can if your body is not constantly at this level of stress. So, the series of, simple tools and exercises that I'm going to guide you first is to help down regulate you, bring you back to here. So that can look like anything from a diaphragmatic breath, because what, especially in in our day and age, everyone is breathing from their accessory muscles, not realizing that's actually inducing a state of fight or flight in our bodies. So just getting people to feel aware of how are we breathing is the first step and the foundation of everything. And then I'll quite literally have people get acquainted with your body, because most of the symptoms that I see people coming in with is due to a disconnection of their body. So with everything, if I could just boil the things that I do, it's I'm here to help support people to reconnect back to their bodies and feel safe at home. Because if we can cultivate that safety, that felt sense of safety within ourselves, that person can go into their orbit, their home, go to their spouse, go to their kids, and be as regulated and safe as possible. And that is how we can create the subtle changes of, okay, well, maybe there is a lot of chaos going on in the external, but can I come back in and at least create safety within the parameters of what I can control? So that's the conversation, some of the conversations I have with some of my patients. And what I'll also say is incorporating two simple action snacks, like instead of action steps, it's less daunting, is when you're driving, can you bring yourself back into the present moment? Because so many of us, our minds are like 150 miles over here or like 20 steps in the future. None of us are actually here, or we're so stuck back there. So, one of my favorite practices that I learned back in when I was working in a vestibular clinic that helps with panic attacks, anxiety attacks, is the 5 4 3 2 1 technique. So it's when we find 5 things around our environment to just objectively note, 4 things we can hear in our environment, 3 things we can touch, the steering wheel, feel the seat underneath us, feel the floor underneath us, 2 things we can smell, and if you have a mint on hand, pop that in so then you can't coexist in the future and the present moment. So it's a very simple grounding activity that can help take people out of that reeling sensation of being like everywhere and, anywhere all at once except here, if that's the saying goes.
Is amazing. Simple but very profound. Very profound to bring you into the present moment. Because sometimes when your mind is racing, but if you get your mind busy by saying, okay, I'm going to see 5 things,
Right.
I'm going to hear 4 things. What was the next one? I'm going to feel three
Yes.
things.
And
I'm
then
going to
smell.
smell 2 things. And then if I have something in hand, I'm going to taste my gum or my mint or whatever. By
Exactly.
the time you've gone through that, you're not in your racing thoughts anymore. You're not noticing the traffic because you're busy doing something else.
Exactly. And it gave just learning that simple yet, like you said, profound technique gave me so much insight of why, when I was 19, I was feeling the way that I did because I was driving, bracing my steering wheel, driving towards LA, thinking about the midterm I have, thinking about the three jobs that I have to take care of everywhere but here. And then, God forbid, I rear end someone. And then pff, there goes any sense of just, you know, stability that I have internally. But if we are in that, internal sense of stability already, and worst case scenario, I do love tap someone, then I can actually come into that situation from a much more grounded and structured place. Because then that's where we see a lot of people have emotional outbursts and reactions where it doesn't match the situation.
Yeah, I mean, you were talking about driving, but when you said that, I thought that can, with everything. I was talking to someone and they said, if someone says something and you're about to react, ask yourself the question, is that what they really mean? In other words, before you react, did they really mean what I think they're meaning? And
That's
usually they're not. So if you did that, or if you did the 5 steps, and then you're calm and you're inside yourself, and then you really think about what the words were. Okay, did they mean that or
right.
not? And and by the time you've done those 5 steps that you gave us, you're already calm. So hopefully you're not taking things personally, because a lot of times what upsets us is when we take things personally when they're really not.
100%. I'm happy you brought that up too, because it's very easy. I mean, all of us experience the world around us from a very subjective point of view. Therefore, we will interpret anything from our subjective experience. And sometimes our subjective experience is not matching the context of what is happening at hand. So then that's where we can create disconnect within the relationships around us. We experience, also disconnect within the workplace. And that's why it's hard to, have some form of resilience if we don't have that awareness of, oh, those are the stories that I'm telling myself versus that is what is objectively true in the moment. So it's just a matter of like checks and balances. And that's why, like, part of the work I do as well is helping people understand what are the stories that we continuously tell ourselves that are actually keeping us stuck, that are actually holding us from seeing ourselves in our fullest expression, that is also inhibiting us from being able to connect in the way that we're meant to in the world around us.
Mhm. That's true, because when you feel a certain way about yourself, sometimes you don't even want to connect with people because you're thinking that, well, I don't fit there or I don't feel good there. But if you
Right.
were thinking differently, you'd go, oh, yeah, I fit with that group. I could have fun with that group. But it's those filters that we all have.
Yeah, 100%. The filters are interesting. It's like that part of our brain that acts as a filter depending on what we feed it. It's like, have you heard of that one analogy? It's like the two lions, which represent our mind. One lion is the one that is representing our negative thought patterns, the self-limiting beliefs, and the other one is actually our truths. It's who we are in our fullest power and authentic expression. And with each thought, we are choosing which lion gets the snack, and then
Uh-huh.
which one ends up starving in that process. So it is such, an ever evolving journey of trying to feed the right lion, I guess.
Exactly. So just going back to when, you were having the migraines, because when you're really in something, there's, like you said, even went into a slight depression, there's like a hopelessness, there's a stuck feeling like, oh, this is and it's hard to even see your future without having this, in your case, headache or pain or whatever. So what do you tell people when they're in that hopeless state?
In those moments, I mean, as we are seeing more and more clinically, right, there's such varying degrees of how people experience that. And if people are going through that episode in real time, I say, create any sense of grounding for yourself. Anything that at least nourishes you to the bare minimum, because to to have anyone do anything more than they can in that moment just feels so heavy and it feels like a lot. And having someone on the outside who you can feel safe with, that can be your anchor in those moments. Because I mean, in those moments, I am so grateful for the roommates that I had, the friends that I had who was like, oh, Angelica's having, a migraine episode. Turn the lights down, close the windows, let's get her some water, get her some electrolytes. And, you know, that's like the team that you want to have on your side who can just pick it up, because it's so hard in those moments. And that's why I'm like, I hear people and I see people going through that, and it is by and large not fun whatsoever, which is why it's also important now, once we get out of those triggered states, how can we reduce those number of episodes? And that's a lot of the education that I now share too. So I've gotten patients from experiencing headaches and migraines almost every 6 to 7 days a week to no more than 3 to 4 times a month. And then those are the times where they know their triggers. They're like, oh, I had a headache yesterday because I drank a beer and I forgot to hydrate. Or like, oh, I didn't eat enough because I was like staring at my screen for 6 to 8 hours and then didn't get up. So now they're more aware of what and just conscious, and that's awareness is power.
Mhm. For sure. And you talked about, having your roommates and they were really taking care of you. And there's a lot of people in this world, unfortunately, that they are alone. They don't have family. They might not have really close friends. And what I tell people now, the internet and social media gets a really bad rap, but in this situation, there are groups that are talking about positive things. If you just even get on a Facebook group where they're talking about positive things, or even find a place on the internet where someone's telling a joke, a funny
Right.
comedian that you enjoy, you need to have that somehow kind of connection, even if it's a the wireless kind on the screen. You need some kind of connection when you're going through that, and the worst thing you can do is just stay by yourself.
That's so true. And it is really a two-edged sword with how social media and online has evolved over the years. But, there's such a beauty to it too. Like, you really do seek out the information that you need. You can, there's all kinds of resources on YouTube. I feel like that's also important too, to have those anchors of people that bring that positive light and energy within you, like you said, whether it's a comedian or it's someone who just knows how to like really bring out that sun in you again, even for like a 5% amount can make the world a difference.
For sure. So, talk about your own experience. So you got through the headaches, you're not having the headaches, you're helping other people, and you're working, and you're a driven person like a lot of very successful entrepreneurial people. And then you realize that, oh, I'm not doing my creative things anymore.
Oh my
So,
goodness.
yeah. So what happened with that?
I appreciate you for bringing that up. You know, this was a realization that I had much recently, actually, where the things that had brought me so much joy, which I will not take away from the work that I've done and all of the years of study and clinical whatnot, as you know. But there's a different joy that you experience when you are doing something just for your pure enjoyment. And I feel like, because growing up, every time I did a hobby, it always had to be for a means. I was such a competitive little girl, little honestly, up until I was like 21 years old. And then I was consciously aware of, Angelica, you don't need to like, you know, compete with everything that you do. You can do it without a means. And when I finally started to register, I can do things without a means. I was like, so I can go to a dance class and absolutely bomb it, but what matters is that I enjoyed it. So now I'm in a season of my life where am creating a different kind of balance between doing work that really fills my soul's dharmic purpose. And then there's also fun things that I'm creating space for that allows my inner child to like thrive and flourish, which then fills my well, that inspires me to think outside of the box and to pour into, my patients or my community. So those activities have been just getting out into nature. I love driving a little bit out to go up some of the hikes out here in Los Angeles, or I'll drive to the ocean on the weekends, or I'll something that I am a prolific writer. Like I will just write until my hand kind of feels like it's about to fall off because it's such a safe space where I can just inject whatever thoughts and ideas I have. So this period is kind of like what I shared with you. Um, in writing, it's like my creative reclamation era. Reclamation, we're reclaiming something that was lost. And now I kind of see that in other people of who has the ability or who is still connected to their creativity, because that even in itself is pretty healing.
Yeah. So, sorry, I started getting a frog in my throat.
No worries.
So you're going out into the countryside, and then you were talking about dance. What kind of dance are you doing?
So honestly, I haven't taken a formal dance class since I was 5. And the first class back that I did last maybe 2 months ago was a heels class, which was so challenging, but it was so liberating at the same time. And now I just want to get into some kind of like hip hop or whatever, the nearby dance class is offering.
Mhm. And it's good to remember that sometimes it's just the process of doing something that's so enjoyable. You
That's
don't always have to win at it or be the best at it. It's just a process.
right. Yeah, that's why it's fun seeing the journey of some some people who are in their like middle or even like their later half years who come into some kind of new hobby, whether it's like ice skating or dancing. And then just because they loved it so much, they ended up being absolutely killers at it of what
Mhm.
we would conventionally deem successful. So
Mhm.
I'm just getting to a place where I'm like, okay, success does not always constitute to you need to win a gold medal for everything. It can literally be just like you said, enjoying the process of doing it.
Mhm. Exactly. And so talk about actually goal setting as a very driven person. Um, Sometimes we create goals, and as we grow, we think everything should be so easy, you know? I
Right?
set this goal, I'm going towards my goal, but we should know this by now. There's ups and downs in life. So as you're growing, sometimes it can be painful.
Oh my goodness. I mean, goal setting as what I would consider a healing perfectionist and highly functional type A, whatever you want to label it. Goal setting has been to this day, it's something I'm still consciously working on of not constantly also moving the goalpost. Um, what I've realized is kind of to your last point is coming back to enjoying the process because in the pursuit of the goal or point B, it's so easy to it's easy to lose yourself. And I can say that so confidently because I've done that many times. I remember finishing undergrad in 3.5 years with like all of like the achievements. And at that point, holding my diploma was like, wow, why do I feel so empty? And then it was the same feeling that I got when I was graduating from PT school. I'm like, what happened? Like, this is supposed to be the pinnacle of my life, this and that. And it makes me sound so just um not just like not naive, but I was like, it's because I didn't allow myself to just enjoy the seemingly mundane moments in the process of achieving each of those milestones. And then also taking a beat to reflect on who I'm becoming in the process of, preparing to hit that milestone. So that's really the instead of like goal setting, I really do think of what is my North Star? And am I in alignment with that North Star today? Great. It could be anywhere from, oh, I decided to move my body today. That was great. Or, oh, I'm going to really refine the way that I take care of my patients a little bit more today. Great. So it's thinking about what are my daily inputs, my non-negotiable inputs that I can say, great, that was a day that was still scaling 1% towards that North Star. And I'm not going to take away from myself because I put in that effort to be a little bit like 1% better than where I was yesterday. And I'm not going to kill myself every day leading up to what my external next goal is, because that too is what can lead to a whole ton of burnout. And that's a whole other thing.
Yeah. And it's celebrating those little wins. Like
Right.
if you had a day and you said, okay, I'm gonna accomplish this today and you accomplished it, that's a win.
Yeah.
That's a win. And one thing I learned from an early age, and we've all heard it probably from our parents or from teachers or from someone, if you do your best, if you actually put in the effort and you actually did the best you could at what you were working at, then that's a win.
Right.
Failed, it's okay. But you put in your best effort at the level that you're at, and you have to be bad before you can be good before you can be great. And we all know that, but nobody wants to start in the bad part, but we all start there when we're doing something new.
That's such a good reminder. One of my favorite books within this creative recovery season of my life is called The Artist's Way
Mhm.
by I think Julia Cameron. And she says this quote, you have to get through the bad art in order to get to the good. And I was like, that's so true. Every writer, writes so much considerable gibberish before they get to the place of creating what they're known for. Every artist has like painted so many things, but then they just committed to the process. It's like with that too, it's the consistency. And that too is such a nuance in what I'm realizing this generation has not lost the essence of, but because we're in such a quick, like delay or like, instant gratification culture, there
Mhm.
is that there's no one really talks about how important it is that it takes time to be bad at something before you can get to a place of whatever it is your specific intention or goal is for your life.
Yeah. So when I had my vision therapy practice, sometimes my therapist would come to me and say, this child that I'm working with, they were doing good, but the last three sessions, they're not progressing. In fact, I think they're getting worse. And what I would tell them is keep doing the process. And then the next week the kid would come back and they have exponentially jumped to this higher level and they stay there. The thing is, their body was, doing the perfect I call it the perfect practice. The body was doing the perfect practice, consistently practicing. It was learning. Maybe it was on a plateau or maybe it was integrating. And
Mm,
once it integrates, as long as you stay consistent and keep doing it, you don't stop, you keep doing it, as long as they're practicing correctly, then you're going to get that win. But everybody's system, everybody's body takes different amounts of time. And it's like that with a lot of things. You kind of learn and then you're like, oh, I'm kind of plateauing. And then you learn, oh, I'm kind of plateauing. But if when you start plateauing, you say, oh, I'm going to quit, well, you're done. You lose. If you
right.
keep consistent, you're going to keep going in the direction that you want, just like the book you talked about.
That's such a good it's the visual where what people think growth is like just linear when it's
Hmm.
actually a bunch of like hills and valleys, which is
Hmm.
So true. And it's always analogous to life, and just what we think is like a low point actually is like propelling us into the next whatever is meant to come. So it's a good reminder that maybe in the moments where it feels like we're in our darkest place, just trust that, even when it rains, it shines, and vice versa. And like finding the solitude and grounding amidst those moments to know that like you are going to be okay, you are always guided, trust, and really like have faith in that.
Mhm. And you're learning during the high and low times.
Yeah.
So if you can just look at something, even the things that look negative or not what you want, if you can look, back at them and say, okay, where were the learnings then? What can I pull from that? Because you were learning. It might have been painful when you were learning, but you were learning, which makes you able to be more successful in the future. Because, we get this small problem and then we grow. We're like, oh, yeah, so I can solve those problems now. I'm good. I'm going to solve anything. And then what happens? The next project is bigger.
Right. That's so
We're
true.
like, "Oh," and then we're bad until we can be good again, and then
Yeah.
we get over that one, like, "Oh, I'm successful at this big project," and what comes up? The humongous,
Another big project.
gigantic. So, we're just always growing and progressing, getting to that next level, and if we can keep that in mind, we're gonna feel better about what we're doing, and if we can just, like I said, celebrate those little things along the way, because the process is what makes it fun. We think when we get that win, like you said, like your degree, like when you accomplish something, like, oh, you're gonna feel so good. The thing is, all the steps along the way were where the wins are. The certificate at the end is just a piece of paper.
Right.
I mean, it means you made it. Just like if you climb Mount Everest, when you get to the top, okay, I got to the top, woohoo!
Right.
And then you're
Put
like,
a flag in the
huh, I put the flag. What else? Nothing. You're at the top. know. So,
That's it reminds me of there was this one podcast that I was listening to, Dr. Andrew Huberman, and he
mhm,
was talking about how learning actually sticks is when there is a challenge in front of it. So there was a series of studies that they did where there was a series of obstacles. I think it was I forgot if it was in children or whatever the demographic was. But the way that the brain processed it, it quite literally grew their prefrontal cortex because the challenge, that's what makes our brains grow. And the better we can create resilience in those moments of trial and tribulation, that is always what is actually going to prepare us for what that next big project is. And I feel like there's this emerging sense of a need to talk about how do we build resilience in ourselves, and how can we once again still find the silver lining in the moments that feel trialing and be like, oh, when we look back at it, it's always hindsight 2020. Oh, that makes sense why I had to go through that. What a butterfly effect it would have been had my doctor not prescribed me beta blockers for something that was actually suppressed emotion and a severe dysregulated nervous system, you know?
exactly. Yeah. And you were talking about your brain gets larger with these things. What you do with movement. That's why when I did my therapy, I included a lot of movement, vision, the brain, and then movement, because that would increase people's intelligence. So even when you are doing simple movements with people, especially if it's novel or different, in other words, they don't normally do it in their daily life, they're
Right.
creating, you're helping them create new brain pathways. You go into that new dance class because it's novel and your brain is learning something new, you're creating new brain pathways because we have all this kind of gray and white matter, but it changed into pathways that actually come alive and work when we add the movement. So what you do with people, any type of movement you're doing with them is helping them. not only feel better physically, but become stronger from an emotional intelligence point of view.
Absolutely. No, that's so reinforcing to remember because I feel like, especially within allopathic medicine, as we've seen, it's what we find as a solution is very quick. It's very, let's get the pain away. But sometimes we have to experience just a healthy amount of discomfort. Sometimes it's almost painful making those changes, but it doesn't always mean that it's bad when we're building muscle on our body, right? I mean, it feels like we're literally ripping things on a microscopic level. So it makes sense that it translates to things that are happening up and downstream in our brain.
Exactly. And anyone who's been into even exercise at all, which I have most of my life, you know, I know that like when I was doing CrossFit, which is pretty rigorous, if I that night or the next day when I woke up, if I was really sore, the faster I can get into the gym, the better.
Right.
Sounds weird. A lot of people go, "Oh, I'm sore. I don't want to go work out today because my legs hurt." And it's like, no, I realized from experience, the sorer I was, the faster I wanted to get back in the gym. Now I might not do the same thing. So if I
Right.
was doing all leg work the day before, I probably wouldn't want to go in the gym the next day and do leg work. But I
Hmm.
want to be moving my legs and maybe doing arm work, but still moving my legs to get all that lactic acid moving. And
Exactly.
yeah, it's like moving into the pain, but as you move into the pain, you also move out of the pain.
Right. Oh my gosh. That is, it's so important to be able to go through it too, or else we kind of just stay in it. We can't stay in the lactic acid or the pain. And
Mhm.
there's even goes with emotional cycles. You know, I I wish I could remember the researchers who are looking at the physiological effects that emotions have on the body, but they described emotions as kind of like going through a tunnel. You know, when you're driving through a tunnel, when you get from point A to the other side of the tunnel, you're in the clear.
Mhm.
But if you stay stuck in that tunnel, aka an emotional cycle that's happening, it feels like we linger. We're stuck, and that's what creates everything that we're experiencing today. If we don't have the safety to finish that full cycle of an emotion, which I thought was very fascinating. If we're like going through the whole cycle of pain and emotion.
Exactly. And I was thinking back again of, the headaches you experienced and some of your patients um experience is that if you can just be aware of what's happening when it's happening, so you can leave that cycle. And like I love that 5 4 3 2 1. I love that. And what are there other things that you typically tell your patients? Like some things, there's certain things that I talk about all the time, like dry eye, because seems like everybody has dry eye. So,
Mhm.
are there other practical things that people can do just to regulate themselves, just to feel better?
Yes, common practices as far as helping people essentially transition into our body's natural rest and relaxation response is next to the 5 4 3 2 1 technique is as simple as take a before you jump into your next interaction, obligation, meeting, can you make space for 3 deep breaths? And they think I'm crazy, but I've had mothers come to me and literally say, right before I went home, I just sat in my car and I took 3 deep breaths and went inside, and whatever happened after that, I felt like I was able to meet that, that environment or circumstance from a level head. And what that does is that deep breath helps instantly turn on our parasympathetic nervous system, but then it is able to signal to our brain, okay, there's separation. Because if there's no separation Everything from the moment we wake up to the moment right before our head hits the pillow, we're just overstimulated. That is, we're in a silent epidemic of overstimulation, whatever you want to call it. So, how can we find any kind of rhythm or groundedness? Create space. Because then, what does that space mean? That's an opportunity for you to check back in with yourself and be like, what do I need today? And that's the second practical reminder. A lot of the work I do, they're almost like reminders.
Mhm.
Have you, I ask my patients, when was the last time you genuinely just sat with yourself and asked, what do you need today? What do you need today in order to get through this day? It could be as simple as, okay, you need your favorite coffee, or I really need to take a walk. And the more that you start listening to your body and what it tells you to do, you start to create self-trust. You start to build a healthier relationship with self, and that is where we can finally start to create ripples effect into every other aspect of our lives. And that's also some of the work that I also do in my coaching containers where it's like, okay, from this place now, it might feel like we're recalibrating the entire way that you approach your life because you have been going through this framework or this lens of never even considering your self-care in the midst of caring for the world around you.
That makes total sense to me because sometimes on the days that I go into the office and I come home, and if there's a family member there and they start talking to me or asking me stuff right away, I'm like, just give me a minute. Just let me just put my purse down. Please let me put my dirty dishes from lunch into the dishwasher. I just need like 5-10 minutes just to change from work
Right.
mode to home mode because what my patients need at work is different than what my family needs at home, and I need those few minutes just to, stop. Like you said, you need that break, otherwise it is like a continuous, um, people asking you for things they need, and it's like, "Huh, I just need a minute to breathe and to reset my brain."
100%. And why I have been, so I work with both men and women, but particularly in this season, I've been very drawn to work with women because I see our multifaceted nature with, I'm not generalizing, but with men, we have they're very like waffle oriented. Like I will deal with this and then with this and this. We're with as women, we're like the spaghetti. We're like, I can be here and then I can be here and then here. And that is our power and our deficit at the same time if we don't know how to funnel that energy, efficiently and in our favor. So you're right, having that moment to like switch my hat from like work mode to like family mode. And then from like even within work mode, I'm serving my patients here and then I'm serving my community. Like that allows us to be so tapped in and present for each of the different things that we have on our plate.
Exactly. So if people wanted to work with you, this is the point where I'd like to tell people, like, do you have a website, your social media, what services you're offering now?
Yes, thank you. So, if you feel called to learn more about the work that I do or want to know how you can work with me in general, you can check out my website. It's just my name, angelicaalberto.com. And you can find a series of my offerings on there. I do anything from one-on-one movement optimization, which is my integrative physical therapy services, to now what I am also cultivating is this very high touch coaching container that integrates all of the things that we talked about from the reconnecting to your body, regulating your nervous system, improving your relationship to self, and how do you create an entire identity that prioritizes you so that you can show up as your best self for the world and your work around you. That's my embodied reclamation coaching container. So if you are interested in that, feel free to message me through my website or email me at info@angelicaalberto.com. And if you just want to learn about some of the methodology and how I approach care or just my perspectives, I post regularly on Instagram. My handle is dr.angelica.alberto.
Great, thank you. So now I have a personal question for you. What gives you the most happiness and fulfillment in your life at this point?
Mm, that's a great question. What gives me the most joy and fulfillment right now in this season is the realization that everything that I'd ever prayed for has always been here in this moment. And I don't need to chase, I don't need to be anything outside of who I am. And from this place, I have beautiful people in my life who I love and who love me unconditionally, and that's what allows me to pour into the people, places, and spaces that I'm being called to serve and support.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much. And thanks for being on the podcast
Thank
today.
you.
Wonderful conversation.
It was so great. Thank you so much for this space, Dr. Kimberly. It was really wonderful.
Yeah, so I have one last question.
Yes.
What is your best advice on living an incredible, amazing life?
Mm, my best advice for living your most incredible, fulfilling life is do not undermine trusting yourself. You know more than anyone what lights you up, what drives you, what your dislikes are, what you like. So when you tune into that place of what is it that I enjoy and give it space to breathe, I promise you that will show you everything that you needed to know, all of the clarity that you've been praying for because you decided to just give yourself the space to listen and tune in.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Kimberly.
We'll talk to you again soon.
Until next time.